Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. In this video, we are going to be solving the 2020 WASSCE ICT Practical on Spreadsheet. So this question is all about calculating telephone call payments. And we are going to be using formulas and functions to solve it or to calculate everything. So without wasting any time, let's get right into it. Alright, welcome once again. Now let's read through the question and see what we need to do. So we are looking at question 1. And it says payment for telephone calls in a country is calculated based on the following conditions. Now beneath it we see a table with some information which we'll be using. The first thing we see is the type of call, which is local, trunk and foreign. Then we see amount for the first 3 minutes, 10, 20 and 30, and amount for every additional minute, which is 5, 10 and 15. So basically what this means is that if, for example, I made a local call and then the duration of the local call was 3 minutes or less, it means that I'll have to pay 10. Now let's assume that the figures here are in cedis. So in other words, what I'm saying is that if I make a local call and then the duration of that call is 3 minutes or less, I would have to pay 10 Ghana cedis. But for the situation where the duration of the local call is greater than 3 minutes, so maybe 4 minutes, 5 minutes, then what I'll do is I'll have to pay for the first 3 minutes, which is 10. And then the remaining minute, I'll have to use this figure here to calculate how much I'll pay. That is the whole idea. And I'll show the formula to do this in a moment. So let's continue with the question. Now we see calls made on a particular day are as shown below. And then you see another table consisting of the customer names, the call type that they made, and then the duration of the call in minutes. Now we see amount payable and it is empty. So it means that the question is expecting us to calculate for the amount payable, which we'll do very soon. Now let's continue. Using an appropriate spreadsheet program and the table above, A, calculate the amount payable per customer type. Maximum amount due per type of call. Total amount due the call center of the call. Sorry, total amount due the operator of the call center that day. And then B, we have using the header facility, insert your full name and index number. Finally, C, save work as calls in the folder created. So this is the question that we are going to be working on. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create the folder in which we are going to save our working. So to do that, let's head on to our desktop. And on our desktop, we are simply going to right click on a blank space. You should see a pop-up box like this. Now locate new and then click on folder. For the name of our folder is going to be your initials and index number. So I'm going to use my initials to be DG, and then my index number, I'm just going to use something like 101010. Then hit on the enter key. And so this is how you do it. Next, we are going to open up our spreadsheet application, which is Microsoft Excel. So I'm going to search my app, and I can see it over here, and I'm going to launch it. Now, when you launch it, you're going to see a screen similar to this. So what you need to do is to click on the blank workbook option. And that is going to create a nice blank workbook for us. Okay, so now that we've done all this, the next thing we need to do is to create the table. Then we will be able to calculate for the amount payable. So I'm going to reduce the size of the window so that I can look at the table whilst also looking at my spreadsheet. Now the first table I'm going to create is the one that we are going to use for the conditions to perform the telephone call calculation. So that would be this table we have over here. Now on cell A1, I'm going to start typing. We'll type type of call. And then for the type of call, as you can see, we have local, frank, and then foreign. Next, we see amount for the first 10 minutes. And then we have 10, 20, and then 30. And then on cell C1, we have the amount for every additional minute. And then we have 5, 10, and then 15. Okay, So you can see that even though we've typed everything, it is not looking clear. For example, type of call, we cannot see it completely. The same for amount for the first 10 minutes, even for this. So in order to fix this, what you can do is over here at the top left corner, you see this sign over here. So you click it, and it's going to select every cell in our spreadsheet, or should I say worksheet. And then after you've done that, you want to move your mouse pointer to this thin horizontal line. So you can see that between each alphabet, there is a thin vertical line. Then when you move your mouse pointer over it, you should notice a change in the pointer icon. Then you double click, and it's going to create just enough space, just enough width space for the cells to display the content in it. After you've done that, you want to select your whole table like this, and then we want to give it borders. So you select it like that. Then to give it borders, you make sure you're in the home tab, look for the font group, and then above it, you should see an icon like this. Next to it, you click on the arrow to see the drop down menu, and then you locate all borders and click it. So that's how you give your table borders. Finally, I want to bold in the title for each and every column. So for type of calls, amount for first 10 minutes, and then the amount for every additional minute. So you select them, and then to bold in it, you either use the shortcut Ctrl+B, or you make sure you're in the home tab. Once again, in the font group, you look for the B icon here and click it. And that will also bold in our text for us. So now you can see our table is looking much neater than before. Next, we are also going to create this table so that we can perform our amount payable calculation. So we are going to start creating it on cell, let's say cell A7. So let's start typing. I think it will be better for me to speed up this part of the video so that I don't waste time. So I'll do just that. Alright, so now we are done with the creation of our tables. You can see everything is looking nice and neat. Now the next thing we need to do is to perform the amount payable calculation. So that is what we are going to cover next. Alright, so now let's go through the formula we will be using to calculate for amount payable. So I've prepared something to explain it. Hopefully the understanding will be captured. So now we see the payment rule, and we have two different ways we are going to calculate it. So the first part, we see if the duration of the call is less than or equal to 3 minutes, then we pay only the base rate. So basically the amount payable would be equal to the base rate, which I was trying to explain earlier. But here is the other situation where the duration of the call is greater than 3 minutes. In that case, we will pay the base rate plus the extra charges. So the base rate would be the amount you pay for the first 3 minutes, depending on the call type. Then we get the extra minutes. Then we multiply it by the rate. So you remember the table I showed you earlier in the question. So this is the same table. I've just made a few changes to the titles. So the first part is the call type, local, trunk, and foreign. Then the base rate, also the same as the amount you pay for the first 3 minutes. And next we see extra / minutes. So in other words, the amount you pay for every extra minute. Yes. So basically, let's look at the first example. So the first example, we see Yoko, and Yoko made a local call for 8 minutes. So now the first step we do is to check. So we check the duration. So we check is 8 less than or equal to 3. So 8 represents the call duration, and then 3. We're using 3 because we know how much you pay for the first 3 minutes. So we're asking is 8 less than or equal to 3? The answer is no. The duration is more than 3 minutes. Since that's the case, let's move on to step 2. Step 2 says use the formula for more than 3 minutes. That is this formula over here, the base rate plus the extra minutes times the rate. So since the duration of the call is greater than 3 minutes, that means we use the formula for more than 3 minutes. And for that formula, we would already know the call type. So in this case, the call type is local. And so for a local call type, using this formula, the base rate is what? 10. So that is the 10 over here. If it was a foreign call, the base rate would be 30. And if it was a trunk call, the base rate would be 20. So in this case, the base rate is 10. Now we need to calculate for extra minutes. So that's what we do here on step 3. calculate for extra minute. Extra minute is basically the total duration of the call minus 3, and we get 5 minutes. So basically, as I said, we already know how much we pay for the first 3 minutes. So what we need to do is to take out that first 3 minutes, and then we get the extra minutes, the remaining minute that we have to calculate for. So in this case, it is 5 minutes. We need to calculate how much we pay for this 5 minutes. After that, we add it to the base rate. So we move on to the next step, which is to calculate the extra charges. So in order to calculate extra charges, you multiply the extra minute by the rate. So when you look at the local call, you see that the base rate is 10, but the extra charge per rate, the extra charge per minute is 5. So that is where this 5 comes from. So basically the first 5 represents the extra minute we calculated for, and this second 5 represents the amount you pay for every additional minute, and we get 25. So now in the final part, we add it to the base rate. So remember, the call type is local, the base rate is definitely going to be 10. So this 10 represents the first 3 minutes, and then this 5, so this 25, it represents the extra minute, the extra 5 minutes that we were calculating for. So you see that we got 25. So we add it together to get 35. So it means the amount payable that Yoko would pay is 35. Let's look at a second example. Now in this second example, we see Kali. He also made a local call for 2 minutes. So in this case, we check the duration of the call. So this time, is 2 less than or equal to 3? Yes, it is. So the duration of the call is 3 minutes or less. Since that is the case, we don't need to go through the calculation. Oh, this cock. So since that's the case, we don't need to go through the calculation for calculating for the extra minute and also the extra charge. Since it is less than 3 minutes or is equal to 3 minutes, the amount payable would be the base rate. So you only pay the base rate without any extra charge calculation. So the final answer here would be 10 because the call type is local and the duration of the call to is less than or equal to 3 minutes. So it would just be 10. If it was a foreign call type, it would be 30. If it was a trunk call type, it would be 20. So basically, this is the general idea for calculating amount payable. Alright, so now that I've explained how to calculate amount payable, we can now get started. So you could directly use the formula I showed earlier into these cells, and that would work perfectly fine. But I would recommend using an if statement because that is much better. So now I believe some of you watching might not know an if statement, or maybe you don't understand how it works. So before we even get started with that, I would briefly like to explain how it looks like. Then we come back to our spreadsheet. So let's open this up and then I'll explain it quickly. So there's an if statement, and this over here is the general structure of an if statement in Excel. So generally you start out with an equal to sign, and then you go with the if keyword. After that, you type an open bracket. Next is the condition, followed by a comma, then the value if true, followed by another comma, and then the value if false, and then a closing bracket. So the comma separates these three should I say parameters? Yes, the comma separates them. Now let me explain each of them one by one. So the condition basically it tests or questions what you're asking, and based on what you ask it's going to either be a true or false. So it's like, for example, are you a boy? If you're a boy, then it will turn out to be true, but if you're a girl, it will turn out to be false. So the condition will always be true or false. Now depending on the result of the condition, one of these two values would be chosen or would be returned. So the value if true, what to return if the condition is true. So for example, the example I said earlier, are you a boy? If are you a boy turns out to be true, then the value if true would be returned or would be chosen. But if the condition turned out to be false, the value if true would be ignored, and then the value if false would be chosen or returned. That is how an if statement works. So now let's even look at a good example of how we are going to use it in our spreadsheet. So remember Yoko who made a local call for 8 minutes. So this is the way we are going to use the if statement. So now you see the first part is the condition. If C2 is less than or equal to 3. So this is the condition. And what it's basically saying is that is the value in C2 less than or equal to 3. So let's assume that the value in C2 is 8. So in other words, is 8 less than or equal to 3. That is false. Since it is false, this 10 would be ignored. And then what? This part which has a math expression would be the one that is returned or chosen, because this, remember, this is the condition, then this is the value if true, and this is the value if false, and they're all separated by comma, so it's very easy to identify them. So what is this all doing? What is the general meaning of all this? So the general meaning is that it's asking, first it's checking the duration. You remember the steps I showed earlier? It checks the duration of the call. Now, if the duration of the call is less than or equal to 3, then we don't need to go through the stress of performing the complex calculation. We just return the base rate. So this is for a local call. If the condition turns out to be true, if it is true that the call duration is less than or equal to 3, then just return the base rate. But if this turns out to be false, it means that we need to calculate for extra minutes and then the extra charge. And this formula does that for us. And I've explained it already. Remember, the base rate plus what? This handles the extra minute. So basically C2 is basically a reference to the call duration. So in other words, C2 would be replaced with 8 minus 3, and you will get what? 5. Then it multiplies it with what? The additional rate per minute, which is 5. So we get our answer to be 25, and then we add it to the 10. That is how the if statement works. So you can even see it over here. Is 8 less than or equal to 3? The answer is no. So human beings would say no, but computer would see it as false. Then we move on to the next step. So instead of using 10, which is the value if true, because this turns out to be false, we are going to ignore the value if true. Then we come to the value if false, which is this math expression. So it's going to be 10 plus 8 minus 3 times 5, and we get 35. So that is how we are going to work with it. Now let's come back to our spreadsheet. Okay, so let's start with Yoko. So now, as I said, in order to use the if statement function, you start out with an equal to sign. Then you type the if keyword, and then a bracket, an open bracket. Next, you can see logical test, which is the same as condition. So in this case, we need to check the duration. So we are going to select C8. So we're just going to click it, which contains the value 8. In other words, the duration of Yoko's local call is 8 minutes. So if C8 is less than or equal to 3, then a comma. So this is our condition, which will either be true or false. So the next thing is what? The value if true. So if this is true, it means that we don't need to calculate for what? The extra minutes and then the extra charges. We just give it the base rate, which is 10. So we're just going to put 10 here. Then a comma. The next one is the value if false. So if this condition turns out to be false, then this is going to be ignored, and then the value if false is going to be the one that is returned. So in this case, we are going to put in the formula, which is the base rate, which happens to be 10, plus into bracket. There in the bracket, you're going to calculate for the extra minutes. So that would be what? C8 minus 3. Then you close the bracket, and finally you multiply by what? The amount you pay for every additional minute. So that would be 5. Then hit on enter. Okay, so the problem here is that we didn't close the bracket. So remember I said it starts with an equal to sign, then it ends with a closing bracket. So the application is telling us that it found a typo in our formula, and do you want to accept the correction? So the correction is just the closing bracket. So let's click on yes, and you see we get 35. So now this is the if statement to calculate for Yoko's amount payable. Now let's try for Fafala. So in this case, we are going to do the same thing. Equal to if an open bracket. Then this time we are going to say if C9 is less than or equal to what? 3. Then a comma. If that is the case, then we put in the base rate. Now when you look at the call type, you see that this time it's not local, but it's foreign. So instead of using 10, you're going to use 30. So the base rate should be 30. Now if the value is false, if it is the case that the duration of the call is greater than 3 minutes, then we need to use the other formula. So in this case, you're going to use the base rate, and since the call type is foreign, it means that the base rate is going to be 30 plus, into brackets, we calculate for the extra minute, which is C9 minus 3. We close the bracket and we multiply by what? The rate, the amount you pay for every additional minute. So for a foreign call, that would be 15 and not 5. So we are going to put 15, hit on enter. Okay, so I forgot to do it again. So 15, then you close your bracket. So remember to close the bracket, then hit on enter. And you see it works perfectly fine. So now let's try for trunk call. So for a trunk call, It's the same process. An equal to sign, if keyword, open brackets, then your condition. So in this case, cell C11, it's less than or equal to 3, comma. If that's the case, then you're going to put in the value if true, which will be the base rate. So that will be 20 for a trunk call. If it is false, then 20 plus C11 minus 3, close the bracket, then multiply by what? The amount you pay for every additional minute. So for a trunk call, that is 10. You write in 10, then you close your bracket and hit on enter. And we get 190. So this is how you use the if statement to perform this calculation. However, the problem with this method is that you have to do it manually for each and every customer. So you notice that I first did for Yoko, then I did for Fafala, and I had to do for Yaba. Now I have to do for the remaining empty ones here, which looking at this number of customers, it's not a big deal. But if you had about say 1,000 customers or 100, it means that I have to do this thing manually 100 times. But there's a way to do the same thing for just one customer, and then use autofill, drag down, and it will automatically compute for the other customers. And that is what I want to show next. So it's basically going to be a nested if statement. A nested if statement is basically an if statement inside another if statement. So here's how we are going to work with it. We start out with an equal to sign, just the same way we create an if statement. And this time for the logical test or the condition, we are going to check for the call type. So we are going to say if B8 is equal to local. So this is a string. Anything in between double quotation mark is a string. So local is a string because it's inside double quotation mark. Another thing to note is that when you are typing a string, you have to make sure that what you are typing is exactly what you want. So for example, in cell B8, we see LOCAL, which is local, and the L is a capital L, not a lowercase l. So if you make a mistake here and you type lowercase l, they are going to have a problem. For we humans, capital L or lowercase l is the same, but for the computer, it sees it as a different thing. It's case sensitive. So capital L is considered a whole different thing from lowercase l. So make sure that whatever you have inside your string is the same as what you are expecting. That is just something to keep in mind. So if B8 is equal to local, that is the condition here. Then you remember the comma. Now we need to type in our value if true. So what do we do? In this case, if the call type is local, then we want to put in the if statement that performs the local call calculation. That is what I showed earlier. So that's what we're going to put as the value if true. And since this if statement is inside the main if statement, we don't need to start with an equal to sign. So you just type if. Just go for it to type if, the open bracket, then you put in your condition, which was what? C8 less than or equal to 3. Then a comma, the value if true would be the base rate, and then the value if false would be the formula I talked about earlier, which is 10 plus its bracket. Then we calculate for the extra minute, which is C8 minus 3. We close the bracket, then we multiply by the additional amount you pay for the amount you pay for every additional minute, which is 5 for a local call. Then you don't forget to close your bracket. So that is the value if true. If that is if this condition turns out to be true. If the condition for B8 being a local call turns out to be true, then this if statement responsible for performing the local call calculation would be the value if true. And you've seen how it works already. Now the value, then the next thing is put a comma, and then the value if false. So in case B8 is not a local call type, so for example, when we use autofill and we come here to cells B9, we see that it is foreign. So in case we get to a situation where the call type is not local, then we need to create another check for the other call types for trunk and foreign. So the value if false would be another if statement to check for a different call type. So the value if false would be what? If into bracket B8 is equal to trunk. So trunk is a string. So this is the condition. This is a condition for this if statement. Then comma. So if it is indeed trunk, then what do we do? This time we are going to use the if statement that performs the calculation for a trunk call. So it's the same as the local call. You just have to change the base rate and then the amount you pay for every additional minute. So that would be if. So this time, if into bracket C8 is less than or equal to 3, comma. Then the value if true, instead of 10, this time it will be 20 for a trunk call. And then the value if false will be the same formula. We just make the necessary changes. So that'll be 20 plus into bracket C8 minus 3, close the bracket. Then you multiply by the rate for a trunk call, which is 10. Then you close your bracket for the if statement. Now the value, so this is the value if true. That is if the call type is a trunk call. Now the value if false. The value if false would be the if statement for the foreign call. So someone might be asking, why is it that we don't create an if statement to check if it's a foreign call type? The reason is we started out checking if it's a local call. Then the second thing we did was the second check over here is to check if it's a trunk call. So if this check fails, or if this check is false and this check is also false, it means that the call type is foreign. So even though we could use another if statement to check for a foreign call type, it's not necessary because we've done a check for local, we've also done a check for trunk. So if these two checks are false, then it means that it is a foreign call. So we don't need to check, we just give it the formula for a foreign call. So the value if false would be another if statement. So if into bracket C8 is what? Sorry, C8 is less than or equal to 3, comma. Then for a foreign call, the base rate would be 30. That is the value if true. And the value if false would be 30 plus into bracket C8 minus 3. Close your bracket. Then you multiply by the rate, which is 15. So now after that, we close our bracket 3 times, because so basically the first bracket is to close this if statement, which is the value if false. So we close it. The second bracket is to close this second if statement for the which checks for the trunk call type. And then the final bracket is to close the main if statement. And then you hit on enter. And we get 35. Now this method is definitely more complex than this. So why do we go through the stress of doing this? The benefit of doing this is that after that, you just use autofill. So you select it, you should see a small box colored in green. Then move your mouse pointer over it, click hold and drag down like this, then release. So do you see the benefit? Compared to this method, which is simpler, this one, it's automatic. I did it once, I used autofill, I dragged down and it calculated for the other customers. But for this one, I had to do it manually for each and every one of them. For exams, since you just have 7 customers, it's not a big deal. You can do it this way since it's simpler. But if you had a lot of customers, this would be a much better way to do it, and it's more professional than doing this. And there are other ways of doing it actually, but these two are probably the easiest to do. So I'll be using this formula for this video, but I just wanted to show the different ways of doing it. I hope the understanding is there at least. Or in fact, I think I prepared a diagram here to further explain this. So I have something here. Let me bring it. Oopsie. Let me see if I can bring them together so that we can explain this thing clearly. So let me see if I can move it. Yes, so this is what I want to do. Yeah, so now that I've brought it here, let's go through this complex if statement again in case some people are confused. So in this diagram, I first displayed the basic structure of an if statement, which I explained earlier. You start with an equal to sign, then the if keyword, your condition, value if true and value if false, and I also give them different colors so that to help you spot the differences. So any text that is highlighted, that is colored in red, is the condition. The text that is highlighted in green is the value if true, and then the text highlighted in blue is the value if false. So this is the if statement, the nested if statement that I just used, and hopefully I can explain it better with this diagram. So we started with an equal to sign if, and then the condition. So the first condition was what? If B8 is equal to local. That is the condition. Now so that is the condition for this main if statement. Now what is the value if true? So if this thing becomes, if the result of this condition check is true, then the value if true, as you remember, is what is going to be returned. So the value if true for this if statement is this whole if statement here. I'm using a lot of if statements. So remember, this if statement, it represents the local call calculation. So if the call type is local, then the value if true would be the if statement that performs the local call calculation. That is what I was trying to say. But if this condition B8 is equal to local is false, then this if statement which performs the local call calculation is going to be ignored. So you can even see the comma which separates it. So the condition comma, value if true comma, and then this whole if statement starting from here all the way to here is the value if false. So you can see I've even used a curly bracket to kind of point it out. So it starts from here and it ends with this bracket, not the last one, the last but one. This whole thing starting from the if keyword to the last but one bracket, that is the value if false for the main if statement. And even the comma should be able to guide you. So you can see there's a comma here, another comma here, and then this if statement. So basically, if the call type is local, then the one in the green is what is going to be returned. But if it is not local, then it comes over here. When it comes over here, it now has to do the same check like it did on over here. So to check, is B8 trunk? If it is trunk, the same process, this if statement would be the one chosen, which is the value if true for this if statement, not for the main one, for the nested if statement. And this nested if statement here basically performs the calculation for a trunk call. But if this condition turns out to be false, it means that the call type is most likely foreign because we've already checked local. It failed. We came to check trunk, it also failed. Then it means it's foreign. So it means the value if false, we just use the if statement that performs the foreign call calculation. It's that simple. So this is the best way I could explain it, but it's up to you to choose whichever method you want to use among the two I've shown. So that is it for calculate amount payable. Let's move on to the next part of the question. Now let's move on to II, which says calculate the maximum amount due per type of call. So what does that mean? Basically, in other words, we are saying, or the question is saying, out of all local calls, which one is the highest payment? Which one has the highest payment? Out of all trunk calls, which has the highest payment? And out of all foreign calls, which has the highest payment? So that is what we are going to do next. Now let's go back to our spreadsheet application. And we can come down here to cell A16. And over here, we are going to create a small table. So let's copy this. So we are going to copy from cell A1 to A4 by press. So we select it, then we use Ctrl plus C to copy. Then we come over here to cell A16, then we press Ctrl plus V, and that will paste it here. So we have pasted a type of calls, and over here we are going to type in maximum amount due. So that's where we're going to calculate our maximum amount due for each of the call types. So let me also give this borders so that everything looks equal. Nice. So for this one, there are many ways of doing it, but I'm just going to show the easiest way. So for the easiest way, we are just going to use a function called max. And here's how we go about it. You start out with an equal to sign, then you type the max keyword max, then an open bracket. Now the next thing you do is you select all the numbers that you want. So for this one, we are going to look for the amount payable for local calls because that is where we are looking at for. So we start with the first customer. The call type is local, so we are going to select this. Now we check again for another. So we see foreign trunk, then we see local here. So we have two local calls. We also need to select those ones. So in order to select multiple cells at a go, you have to hit on the control keyword while selecting it. So we select this one first, then you hit on the control key, and then you select the rest like this. Or you could just type it directly if that is better for you. So when we look through our table of data, we see that we only have 3 customers with a call type of local. So it means those are the only ones we will enter inside this max function. Then we close it with a closing bracket. And what this function is going to do is it's going to pick the numbers stored in these cells. So cell D8, cell D12, and cell D13. And it's going to return the maximum. So when we look at all of it, you see that 60 is the highest. So we are expecting 60. Hit on enter and we get 60. Now we do the same for trunk. For trunk, it's much easier because if you look through the table, you'll notice we only have one trunk call. So we just select that, close the bracket, and hit on enter. And then for foreign call, the same thing. Then we select all the foreign calls. So we have 1 here, 2, and 3. Then you hit on enter. So you have to also make sure to close your bracket. Then you hit on enter. And that is it. So this is the maximum amount due per call type. You can also bold in this. And yes, that is it. Alright, now we're on III, which says calculate the total amount due the operator of the call center that day. In other words, how much did the operator of the call center made on this particular day? And to find out, we just need to sum up the total of amount payable. So that is what we are going to do next. Once again, we are back on our spreadsheet, and this time we are going to do it right below. So in order to do it, it's very simple. We use another function called the sum function. So right below the amount payable on cell D15, you're going to type the equal to sign. Then you're going to use sum, S-U-M, and then an opening bracket. And then for the numbers, you're going to select also. You start from cell D8, you just click it, hold and drag down all the way to cell D14. Then you release. Then you close your bracket and hit on enter. So yes, this is the total amount the operator of the call center made on that particular day. Now we should also add some indication so that we know those marking our work know that okay, this is the total, or this is the answer for question AIII, you know. So we could add total. One way to do it, you could just come here and type total with an equal to sign, and then you could align it to the right. So you make sure you select the cell, then you make sure you're in the home tab, locate the alignment group, then you look for align right. So align right, click it, and it's going to align it to the right. So you could do it like this, but I prefer to do it a different way. I prefer to concatenate. Basically, concatenation is adding two different data types together. You know, combining, that's the right word, combining different data types. So I'm going to combine the text total with the amount here, 580. So I'm going to double click this cell. Then after the equal to sign over here, I'm going to put in a string. So remember, a string is inside double quotation mark. And then I'm going to type total with an equal to sign. Then I'm going to close the string. And then I'm going to use the end sign. So the end sign is what we use to concatenate two different data types. So on our right, we see a string, and inside the string, we have total with an equal to sign. And then so this is on our left. And then on our right of the end sign, we see a sum function, which basically returns the sum of all the total of the amount payable for all customers. Then we hit on enter, and you see how it looks. This looks nicer. So we can also align it to the right. It looks good. You could also bold in it. So you can do it whichever way you want. This normal way or this way is pretty simple. So that is the solution for question AIII. Now we are on B, which says using the header facility, insert your full name and index number. Okay, now let's go back to our spreadsheet application. And in order to do that, you want to go to the insert tab, which is right next to so the home tab is basically the default that we are usually on, and right next to it is the insert tab. So you click on insert, then you look for the text group. So this is the text group over here, and in the text group you're going to see header and footer. So you click it, and that is going to show us the place where we type in our headers and footer. But in this case, we are only concerned about the header. So for the header, we are going to type in our full name and index number. So I'm going to type my full name, and then my index number, I'm going to type it here. And then you can click on anywhere in your worksheet. So you see your full name here and your index number here. You can also put in the middle, whichever way you'd like to do it. So that is the solution for B. Oh, and how to return back to the default view. You can just come down to the bottom right, and you will see three icons here. So you see we're on the page layout view. You can click on the normal view, and that will take you back to the way it was looking before. Now for the final part, which is 1C, which says save work as calls in the folder created. That is very easy. So once again, let's go back to our spreadsheet application, and to save it, you can either press on Ctrl+S, and that should open up the save this file box like this. Then you could choose a location from here, or you could browse it. Or the other option is to go to the file tab over here. So you click on the file tab, then it should take you to the back stage of the application. Then you locate save as, and then browse. So it will open in a second. Now in the dialog box that opens, you need to look for the folder you created on your desktop. So you go to your desktop, and then you locate the folder. So this is the folder, you double click, and for the file name, you're going to save it as calls, and click on save. That is it. Now to verify that we've saved it, let's minimize our applications, open up our folder, and you can see our workbook has been saved here, calls. Then this is the file extension. So this is how you save your work, and also this is the full solution to this question we have on our screen. So I hope everyone is able to follow along and understand it. If this video was helpful, then please don't forget to support my channel by giving this video a thumbs up, hit on the subscribe button and the bell to get notified whenever I upload a new video. So thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye for now.